is a nation with a mission, and that mission comes from our most basic beliefs. Our aim is a democratic peace, a peace founded upon the dignity and rights of every man and woman, end quote. These words from George W. Bush clearly show us that our country was founded upon the belief that regardless of race, status, or circumstance, every single citizen of the United States deserves to be treated as a human being. It's because I agree that the future of our country depends on the protection of the rights and dignity of every United States citizen. I stand resolved that in the pursuit of justice, due process must be valued above the discovery of fact. In the pursuit of justice, it's important to make sure the judge and the jury know the facts of the case. But when finding those facts require the violation of due process, what should we value, due process or the discovery of fact? Should we continue to treat our citizens as human beings with inalienable rights, even if that means that some facts may never be found? Today, it's my belief that the rights of citizens must not be compromised, and that in the pursuit of justice, due process must be valued above the discovery of fact. For clarification, let's first look at the definitions of a few of the words in the resolution. Justice means the giving to everyone what is his due. Due process is an established course of judicial proceedings designed to safeguard the rights of the individual. And finally, discovery of fact means to obtain new knowledge of circumstances as they actually took place. The highest value in today's debate round, the thing that must not be violated in the pursuit of justice, and the thing that I, as the affirmative speaker, am going to be upholding today, is human dignity. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy states this about human dignity. Quote, dignity refers to the inherent value of the person as someone, and not merely something. Every person, without exception, is of inestimable worth, and no one is dispensable. Attributing a unique dignity to the human person throws light on the virtue of justice. Rendering to each his due hinges on one's understanding of what each man deserves, and that cannot be correctly ascertained without taking into account the dignity and worth that are at the same time general qualities of all people and inseparable from each of us individually, end quote. To value human dignity is to treat all men as though they're innocent until proven guilty, to treat them with the basic respect that they deserve, and to avoid violation of their life, liberty, property, or privacy without due process of law. I contend that in the pursuit of justice, we must ensure that every innocent man is protected. And this is my first contention today, that justice is more than a verdict. Justice is the giving to everyone what is his due. Simply punishing the guilty is not justice, unless we also seek to protect the innocent. Justice isn't only about what happens inside the courtroom. We must also seek to uphold justice outside the courtroom. Justice isn't only about how we treat the defendant. It also applies to other important parties, such as victims and innocent bystanders. Saying that justice is merely imprisoning the guilty is to trivialize justice, since it ignores the protection of the innocent. This brings me on to my second contention. The discovery of fact, outside of due process, dehumanizes citizens. When we choose to devalue due process in favor of the discovery of fact, there's no longer any way to ensure that human beings will be respected. People are no longer treated as humans with inherent worth. Instead, they're treated simply as sources of information. Information which can be gathered through any means necessary, as we've seen in the case of Savannah Reddick, an honor student at her high school who was never known to cause trouble. When rumors suggested that Savannah was hiding drugs on her person, Savannah Reddick's teachers chose to discover the facts in the most expedient and accurate way possible. Ignoring all forms of due process, they strip-searched Savannah Reddick and found that the rumors were false and that she was innocent. They treated her not as a human being with inherent worth, but instead as an object. They deprived her of her human dignity and subjected her to unjust humiliation. Injustices like these can only be avoided one way, through the proper administration of due process. This leads me to my third contention, that due process pursues justice for all. Due process means that all people will be treated as though they're innocent until proven guilty, and as such, a minimal level of respect must be granted to all people during trial. Due process helps to defend the human dignity of United States citizens through laws such as the exclusionary rule. The exclusionary rule states that any evidence which the police obtain unconstitutionally cannot be used in court. Because of this rule, the police have a strong incentive to conduct searches in a constitutional way that prevents us from arbitrary government power and promotes judicial integrity. Additionally, the exclusionary rule protects the human dignity of United States citizens by preventing rigorous, unwarranted, or excessive search and seizure, by preventing intense police interrogation, and by punishing police brutality. Even though it sometimes causes some facts to be excluded from trial, it's an essential part of our criminal justice system, since it protects the innocent from police abuse, both inside and outside of the courtroom. Due process also helps to protect other important parties, such as victims. In some countries, the victim of a crime can be seized and interrogated, so police can make sure the victim isn't hiding anything. The victim is also subject to unwarranted search, can be secretly held in police custody, and in some cases, victims can even be barred from attending their own trials. Due process helps to protect the victim from such violations of due process, from such violations of justice, and from such violations of human dignity. Due process pursues justice inside and outside of the courtroom, in the means and the ends, for the defendant as well as the victim. When they come into conflict, we must not allow the discovery of fact to unjustly dehumanize citizens. Justice is more than a verdict. It's about the protection of the rights and dignity of every man and woman. We cannot tolerate dehumanization, abuse, or other such injustices. Justice demands we protect the innocent. Justice demands that we uphold due process.
Is it ready? Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing very well also. I just had a few questions here. My first question is, does the resolution require us to throw out due process if we value the discovery of fact higher?
I think that the resolution is asking us whether or not the discovery of fact should take place through due process, or whether we should allow the discovery of fact to go above and beyond what due process allows.
Okay, did you provide any resolutional analysis on that?
Yes, I did. That was right after my introduction and before my definition.
Okay, thank you. Now, would you agree that if I violate someone's rights, I'm not pursuing justice?
If you violate a person's rights, I think the person could be pursuing justice, but I agree that violating a person's rights does compromise justice.
Okay, would you agree that if I'm pursuing what someone is due, violating someone's rights is not pursuing what they're due?
If you don't recognize that a person is due rights, or you just don't think about justice as anything more than a verdict, then you could still be pursuing justice and simply violate justice in the pursuit of justice.
Okay, but would you agree that people are due rights?
I would, absolutely.
All right, thank you. Now, how does due process pursue justice? You mentioned that in your last contention. How exactly does due process pursue justice?
Well, like I talked about, due process pursues justice for all, since it doesn't only attempt to correct a verdict, but it attempts to uphold justice inside and outside the courtroom, in the means and the ends for the defendant as well as the victim. It makes sure people are given what they're due in every part of justice.
Okay, so you're saying that due process protects rights, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, who are the administrators of due process?
The administrators of due process, basically policemen, judicial courts, etc.
All right, thank you. Now, what are some of the safeguards that reduce specifically people at trial, judges and prosecutors? Is there any safeguards that reduce their power?
Any safeguards that reduce the power of judges and juries? There are, yes.
Can you name any of them?
Off the top of my head, and with all these bright lights staring in my eyes, what do you think? Judges have checks on them to make sure that they don't do anything which violates the pursuit of justice, basically due process.
Okay, thank you. Now, can you pursue justice before a crime happens, or to prevent crime? Would you agree that that's pursuing justice?
Crime?
Yes.
Well, kind of protecting the innocent, yes. I think that can be done before a crime is actually occurring.
Okay, so you would agree that preventing crime is a pursuit of
Some
justice?
parts of preventing crime can be a pursuit of justice, right? But it mostly deals with the court procedures and making sure the guilty are punished and the innocent are protected during the court procedure.
Okay, and that's my next question is, can you pursue justice at a trial?
You can.
Okay, thank you. Would you agree that due process sometimes makes mistakes, and innocent people sometimes go to jail, and guilty people sometimes go free?
I think that no system is perfect, but due process definitely does its best to make sure that everyone is doing what they're doing, every part of justice.
Okay, and would you agree that trying to reverse those mistakes would be a pursuit of justice?
Trying to reverse mistakes? Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Now, is it better to stop injustice before it happens, or to deal with the effects?
I think that since you can never tell when an injustice is going to occur, it's best to make sure that dealing with the repercussions is as easily cleaned up as possible. I think it's also important to make sure that we have laws to prevent crime.
All right, thank you. My final question, how do we determine what someone is due?
How do we determine what someone is due? Well, like I talked about, whether they're innocent or guilty deals with it, whether or not they're human has a part to do with it.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Yeah.